welcome to the Next Best Picture podcast, where I'm being joined right now by the director and writer for the film The Toxic Avenger, Macon Blair.
Hello, good to see you.
It is so exciting to finally have you here on the show to talk about this movie in particular. This thing had its world premiere at Fantastic Fest, what, 2 years ago now? 2023, if I recall correctly?
Yeah, 23. Yeah, it's been a minute.
And it's been a long road, not just to get to this point for release, but also too that thing's been in development for so many years. And I know you're a huge fan of this property. I guess I want to start off with, first and foremost, like, what drew you to wanting to do The Toxic Avenger? And did you feel like any kind of pressure being a massive fan of the original property? Or did you feel like, hey, you know what, I was born to do this sort of thing?
Oh, I definitely did not feel anything remotely like I was born to do this or anything. I think that's a that's not how I would come into it. No, I definitely felt pressure because I know that there's it's widely beloved and you don't want to fuck up somebody's baby, you know, and I so the main thing coming into it, there was a lot of considerations. Obviously, you kind of want to appeal to a broad audience and you want to attract this and that, but the main one for me was making sure that the folks that were Trauma fans, either of the original Toxie or just the Trauma universe in general, felt like that this thing that was very special to them was not just being taken and ran away with and turned into something that it wasn't. That was sort of the main priority that I had going into it. We discussed what was going to happen with the story, and we felt like we kind of wanted to do something new and different and not exactly tell the literally beat for beat the same Melvin story from the first one, because then it really does beg the question of why you're doing it in the first place. But I felt like if we could try to be true to the tone and the spirit and the vibe of the thing, that would be the thing to aim for. So that's kind of how we approached it.
Yeah, but like, I'm so perplexed by this thing because it had been built up in my mind now for, like I said, going on nearly 2 years. I watched it just recently, and I didn't feel like it had as much gore or as much swearing that I've seen from other films that also are kind of playing within the same realm that do get distribution. So was there anything like really specifically when you were having talks about seeking distribution for this that distributors just called out and said, we can't do this? This is like, what held this up?
That's a great question, and to be perfectly honest, I don't know, because I was not, I was not in those conversations. I would get sort of secondhand updates, folks at Legendary who were marshaling these conversations, and I did see some of those things online where they were like, "Oh, it's unreleasable," and I don't remember the language, but it seemed like they were saying like it's unreleasable because it's too gnarly, and I was like, "Oh shit, that's the worst thing anybody could say," because for me as a film fan, when your expectations are one thing and you go into a movie and there's something else, there's this whiplash that makes the movie less enjoyable. And I wanted to be like, I was like, there's no universe where this is too gory or too rated R to be released. That's just not the case. It's a very gentlemanly R-rated movie.
I was going to say too, like, I feel like the
Uh,
number one thing that distributors usually get scared of is sex in movies,
Yeah.
violence. I almost, maybe I'm wrong in saying this, but I can't help but feel like the success of something like, say, Terrifier 3
For sure.
had to make somebody feel comfortable with releasing this then by comparison.
Well, I mean, Cineverse did Terrifier 3, and that, I think that sort of positioned them to, that's how you take a movie like that and market it and have it be successful. And I think they saw potential in this movie, not in the same way of it being like a gore score or being a horror movie, the way that one was a very successful horror movie. Because it's not a horror movie, it's a silly comedy that happens to every now and again have some gore in it that's played for laughs, in a in a cartoonish kind of way, but it's not punishing, it's not sinister, and it's certainly not gnarly enough to be like, oh, this is too nasty to be released. And so I don't know what the game of telephone was behind those types of reports. I think it was just, if I had to guess, and this is just me speculating, I think it just didn't feel mainstream enough for people at that time when the market was not funding a lot of things, not buying a lot of things. It was very contracted and very conservative, and it just maybe they didn't feel like it was going to be a crowd pleaser. And so in that moment, that was certainly nerve-wracking, but I knew that Legendary was working behind the scenes to find a distribution partner, and it just took a little longer to finally land with Cineverse. And maybe the success of Terrifier 3 had something to do with that. I don't know. It sort of seems like that tracks to me, but at any
Mhm.
rate, at the right time, at the right place, they connected with Legendary, and they sort of saw the potential in the movie and were able to get their arms around it in a way that, they could give it a real release. I had no expectation that this was even gonna be in theaters, and they're putting it out in theaters, so I feel like if waiting a couple of years to get to that point is part of the deal, fantastic. A little nerve-wracking in the meantime, but that's okay.
Sure. What would have been the plan if it hadn't gone to theaters? Self-distribution or what?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, that would be a Legendary question. I'm sure they would have figured out something with, I don't know, some sort of a streaming platform or something, but they wanted it to have this kind of a release, so, they were waiting for the right partner, and they found that right partner in Cineverse. And
Yeah.
so, I would check in with them every couple of weeks, "How's it going?" And they would kind of give me updates at who they were talking to and stuff like that. And it is kind of a niche movie. I mean, it's like it's kind of made for trauma fans. Obviously, we're trying to appeal to a wider audience, but it does have that particular quality that I could see somebody being like, "Oh, how is this going to play on July 4th?" With the whole family in the audience. I understand that, but to your point, it's not that nasty. It's kind of sweet. It's kind of warm-hearted, and we approached the whole thing as just it being sort of like a zany comedy that happens to have a little bit of blood in it, and I wanted to make sure that expectations around that were calibrated the right way.
Yeah. It has to strike a very particular tone, like you said earlier, that also respects the original while working for a modern day audience. I'm just
Yeah.
curious to know when you have someone like Peter Dinklage, multi Emmy award winning actor, in the lead role here, is that an easy sell for him, starring as the Toxic Avenger, or did he take a little convincing to come on board here?
He did not really take too much convincing. He read it and he had a couple of questions, and there was some discussion about how the technical aspect was gonna work, like how the creature was gonna work, and
Hmm.
there was a decision kind of early on about how that was gonna work, and we can talk about that too. But, um, he and I had kind of known each other a little bit, in times previously. He had sent me scripts to read just to give feedback on, and I would sometimes send him scripts to be like, "Are you interested in this?" There's a little bit of a conversational back and forth going, and so I felt comfortable just approaching him directly and saying, "You wanna read this script? I think you'd be great as the Winston character. We've only got you for 20 minutes at the top of the movie." Um, and that felt like a really important piece of real estate where I really wanted the audience to get connected with this guy and build some sympathy with this guy, before he transforms and becomes this mutant. And so you want a stellar actor for that part to sort of make the most of that 20 minutes that you've got with them. And so
Hmm.
he's who came to mind. I didn't take it for granted that he would say yes. I was kind of crossing my fingers because I would understand if it wasn't his speed. But he came back pretty quickly and had a couple of conversations, and he was pretty much down to go.
Was there ever a conversation about him being the one in the suit under the makeup, or?
There was a conversation about, like, it could go either way, and we felt like there was a whole conversation about that, yes, but we decided before we got into it that it was going to be a, a physical stunt performer in the suit, and, and he would be playing Winston the human, and then obviously he would be providing the voice because I wanted it to have a consistency between the 2 characters. You want it to feel like the same dude.
Right.
And, so that's what we did. And so the way it worked was, Peter came early to the set. We filmed in Bulgaria, and he performed the whole movie, on like a a stage space, just an empty room. And he played the whole thing as Toxie, and I videotaped it. So we had all these hours of videotape of him just sort of like running as Toxie and swinging mops as Toxie and saying all the lines as Toxie. And then we got this great, stunt slash physical performer. She's a great actor named Luisa Guerrero. And we just found her through old fashioned auditions. We got tapes from a bunch of people, and she just did she had a great sort of tumbling reel, and that was part of it, but she also had a great dramatic reel where she did some monologues. And she took those tapes that Peter made and studied them, and then she came to set and played all of her choices the way Peter had done them. And there was a couple of times where other folks came to set and they weren't as aware of what was going on, and they misunderstood and they assumed that that was Peter in the suit. And then they heard her talk, and she has this high-pitched British accent voice, and they're like, well, who the fuck is that? But it was a great sort of dual performance that they both shared to sort of bring that character to life.
So what I also find really lovely about this too is that Lloyd Kaufman, Michael Hertz, the original directors of Toxic Avenger, are credited as producers for this film. Can you tell me about any conversations that you guys had and their involvement in seeing this get made?
Yeah, I mean, we had conversations early on that consisted of basically I mainly interacted with Lloyd. I had a couple of like high five emails with Michael, and he was always very supportive and like go get him, that kind of thing. But most of my conversations were with Lloyd, and those were really him bending over backwards to say, and I'm paraphrasing, do whatever you want. He had like little suggestions about like let's make sure it's entertaining for the audience and that sort of thing, but he really it was like he wanted to convince me that he was not going to micromanage anything. And I was saying like, no, dude, look, this is your fucking thing. Like micromanage all you want. Whatever you want to do is cool. But he kept saying that he wasn't going to do that, and he didn't. He really he showed up to set and was very like, he wanted to see all the props and see all the sets and talk to the actors and stuff like that, and was sort of delighted to be there. But he didn't really try to insert too much of like what was going to go on with the story or the vibe or this or that or anything. He was just there in a very vocal support capacity, which any way he wanted to have been involved would have been great with me. But I thought that was really sweet that that's how he approached it. That's what he said he was going to do, and that's what he did. Before I had any idea for what the actual story of the script was going to be, I knew I wanted to have a cameo for him in the movie, and I didn't know exactly how it would work, but I knew that I wanted the sort of intention of it to be him literally yelling at me and kind of telling me to knock it off or turn the music down or kind of get off his lawn, that kind of a thing. Mush. Just to sort of like, put a little bit of respect towards him. And so that's how I ended up writing the cameo that he has. I guess that's a spoiler, but writing the cameo that he has in the movie.
I talked to a lot of indie filmmakers and even aspiring filmmakers who are working on the lowest of low budget, shooting on like their iPhones in and around like, I live in New York City. So, I'm always talking to young filmmakers about their entry points and what kind of story they want to tell. And many of them tend to start off in the horror genre. And they find that even when you have a very low budget, doing gore effects especially can be a lot of fun and still just as effective, even if you're operating on a higher budget level. So I'm curious to know, on a project such as this, where, it's definitely a step above, a super indie, but also too still working with a modest budget. What was an effect that was deceptively hard to pull off?
I don't know about deceptively, because I should have known it would have been tricky, but we had a bit at the end where, and I guess we can just do spoilers, but
Sure.
where the main bad guy gets sort of upside down impaled on a car engine, and the car
Yeah.
and his body spins around. And it was one of these gags that I had sort of had in my head, and I actually had it in other scripts when I was much younger, like not Toxic Avenger related at all, just sort of like other genre scripts that never got made. And it was always, it's kind of like a Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry type of gag that I always wanted to do. And finally, there was this opportunity where the movie seemed right for it and the resources were there for it. So I would put that in the script. But it turns out that like getting legs that are bent at the knees and they've got pajamas on and everything like that, and you've got this centrifuge sort of machine, and then it's also connected to pumps of blood at multiple points. And so when you spin, you have to sort of time it in a certain way so it doesn't look like a lawn sprinkler where it's turning off and on, as the thing rotates over top of it. And it, in my mind, it was very simple. It was just like he goes in the car and it turns on and he spins and blood comes out. But the actual mechanics of it turned out to be a little bit more of a science project. So there was a lot of like trying things that didn't quite work and going back, and there's a little bit of digital sweetening on it as well, but it's about like what you see on screen is about 90% practical.
I'm sure. Yeah. And I can feel that too while watching it as well. I get such a kick, especially out of just even seeing the makeup effects on someone like Elijah Wood in this, and
Yeah.
like how much fun it is just to see everybody really embracing their roles in a way that appeals to trauma audiences, basically. That like over the top like style that like works best with a crowd at midnight, where everybody could just have a rowdy fun time.
You said it. I
Um,
mean,
yeah.
a big influence for this movie, and you mentioned Elijah Wood, but Rocky Horror Picture Show, of course,
Hmm.
it's very different, but that kind of rowdy viewing environment was to me the best case scenario for this movie. And obviously Elijah's character is a direct pull from that one. I mean, it's riffraff right there mixed with the penguin kind of. That's
Yep.
sort of what his character was based on. But yeah, that's sort of my fondest hope for this movie is midnight screenings with lots of beer.
Well, your last film, I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore, is definitely stylistically different from Toxic Avenger.
Yeah,
Obviously, at this point now, my God, 2017, I think, if I remember correctly.
that's right.
Um, so it's been a minute, obviously, until the release of this. But what is one thing that you learned while making that movie that you took into Toxic Avenger? And what is one thing now that you will take from Toxic Avenger into the next directorial effort?
Oh yeah. I think the one thing that on that first one, I kind of had it was my first movie and I felt like I needed to have everything exactly precisely arranged, exactly
Mm,
the way it was in my brain. And it can never be that way because it's gonna rain or the car's not gonna start that you're filming or whatever, somebody gets sick. I don't know. And I sort of like I would get thrown a little bit when the plan that I had would have to be thrown out. And I figured out how to do it, but it would really stress me out. And so I think I was able to a little bit more go into this one expecting that like, yes, of course you plan to every extent that you can, but you also know that at a certain point some of those plans are going to have to get flushed and you'll have to figure something out on the fly and not let that just sort of expect that as a guaranteed eventuality and not like something to be feared or or scared from. And as far as what to go forward with, I will never again in my life ever have a character with a black contact lens, an entirely black eye, because what you have there is a mirror. And you
mm.
see the entire crew, and you maybe don't see it when you're shooting it, but then you look at it when you get home, and you see the boom guy, and you see yourself, and you see the camera, and you see everything. And every time you have a close up on Toxie, who incidentally has a giant black eye, it's just a reflection of the entire set. Um, and it was the biggest, by far the biggest pain in the ass that we had to overcome. And it was just sort of like, um, it looked really cool in the design phase. I'm really glad with how it turned out, but I wouldn't do that again.
Is that just a pain in the ass for digital tracking to just like basically take that out essentially in post?
Yeah, it depends on how much is there and how close you are and what you're willing to let go. But it definitely like, you have X number of shots that are, you know, budgeted for VFX shots, and then you throw a black eyeball into it, and all of a sudden that number goes way, way up.
Yep. Yep.
And so we had that.
So as we look ahead to the future at this point, and we finally are able to put Toxic Avenger behind us, like we said, it's been a long road at this point. What are you looking to do next? Is there a particular genre or story that you're looking to tell? Because I know that ever since your career like started, you have a very devoted like following who love your work no matter wherever you're a producer, actor, or director. So anything you could share would be awesome.
Wow. That's amazing. I'm kind of not that feels great to hear. I don't think of myself as having any kind of a following, but that's very nice of you to say. I'm in pre-production on a movie right now. I'm going to Atlanta in a couple of weeks to start shooting. And it's a road movie and it's a comedy, and I would describe it as something along the lines of The Last Detail, if you know that movie.
Yeah.
Couple of fuck ups in a car on the road, having a difficult time getting from point A to point B. So much, much smaller in terms of scope and budget and everything than Toxie. And it's also much closer in terms of tone to the first movie. In other words, it's like if Toxie is very cartoonish and over the top and silly, this one's a little more grounded, a little more realistic, still a comedy, but not in as much of a cartoonish way, I would say.
Who you got starring in this one?
Dave Franco and O'Shea Jackson Jr.
It's a good pairing. That's gonna be
Yeah,
a lot of fun.
psyched.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the record, I just got to say on a personal note as we end here, for me personally,
Are we done already? We were just
yeah,
getting started. Oh shit.
I mean, I was going to cap this at 20 minutes, but I just wanted to say Blue Ruin, man, like
Oh,
that's my movie. I adore that film, like with all
thanks,
my heart,
dude.
man. So
I appreciate that. That's a very special movie for me. It was my favorite time getting to work on a movie with Jeremy and with all of our friends, and it sort of felt like a sort of a turning point for us, in a way that I can't even really articulate, but it felt like a really special time. I'm always very grateful for that
you think
movie.
you and Jeremy will come back together again?
Oh yeah, I mean we've got a company together, and so you know, uh, I, I was busy kind of working on Toxie and other things when he did Rebel Ridge, but we were in contact a lot during that, but I wasn't able to be in that. He's doing this new one now, but I'm going to be doing this one. So we talk all the time, and we
Yeah.
sort of help each other develop our stuff. But as I've always said to him and anyone else who will listen, I would be very happy to only ever make Jeremy Saulnier movies for the rest of my life. That would be that would be perfect, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I'm sure we'll do something at some point, but who knows when.
Hey, you know what? If we can wait between Casino and Irishman for De Niro and Scorsese to get back together, I'm sure we can wait for you and Jeremy to pair
Yeah,
back
we'll
up
do our
together.
old man movie when we're 80.
All right. Well, hey, Megan, thank you so much for your time here. I really appreciate it, man. And best of luck because you fought hard for this movie and it's been a hell of a ride to get here. So
Oh, thanks, dude. I appreciate that, and it was great talking to you. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to holler at me.
will do, man. Take care.
Cool. See you.